Tenamwari. 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 Giving thanks unto the Mother, Father, creative life force of the universe, Kuzai Muzimu Mokodo. Give praises unto our great ancestors, Abibi Fahodie, Abibi Tumi, African liberation and African power for all African people. Tenamwari.
Tenamwari.
We're going to be giving some wisdom from our ancestors. Says, Ofu, the giving one, gives to them so that they might nurture. Ofun, the giving one, gives to them so that they might care for others. This was the teaching of Ifa for Oduduwa, who was doing good work all over the world. He said, doing good worldwide is the best expression of character. They said, a part of the world would not thank him for his kindness, and others would not even recognize its value. But he said, a father cannot help but give good things to his children. A mother cannot help but give good things to her son or daughter. They said that Oduduwa should sacrifice so that all the good things which he gave people, if they were wasted in the world, they would return to him in good order. He heard and he sacrificed. Tenamwani. Such is the wisdom of Muzimu Makuda. Our great ancestors say, hail to the power of the word.
Hail to the power of the word.
So this is taken from the Oduifa. Yes, the Oduifa is the wisdom teachings of our ancient Yoruba ancestors. Yeah, and I don't mind confessing that when it comes to the Odu, I am but a baby in overstanding. But it's beautiful to be able to read and study the text and glean from it lessons and wisdom, and especially ethical teachings that we can draw at whatever level of overstanding that we are at. Does that make sense? Yeah? And so this particular Odu stood out to me in relation to today and our observance today and honoring OMOWALE Malcolm X. And the reason why is, first and foremost, you see a name here, and the name which is listed here is Oduduwa. And Oduduwa, for those who may not be aware, is the father, popularly speaking, of the Yoruba nation. And I say popularly speaking because in some readings, Oduduwa is not male but female. All right? But typically, when you hear the name Oduduwa, you're referring to the progenitor or the father of the Yoruba people. This is the character within the Yoruba history that plays a pivotal role in the Yoruba becoming a nation of people. Yes? The Yoruba nationhood concept is centralized around many ancestors, and Oduduwa is one of the central ones, and in many ways, the central one. Is everybody with me? Yeah? And then it speaks about Oduduwa doing good all over the world. And that Oduduwa, in the doing of good all over the world, may not be recognized for the good that he is doing. But even though he may not be recognized, he is given the counsel to do good anyway and sacrifice in the doing of good. And that when Oduduwa does good and sacrifices in the doing of good, whatever good he's doing in the world will return to him, even if it is wasted at the time that he is doing the good. Does that make sense? Yeah? And so we see that we're honoring OMOWALE Malcolm X today. A man who traveled the world doing good. And there were many who did not recognize him for the good that he was doing in the world. And so we see that the good that he was doing on many of the minds of African people was wasted at the time. On many, it was fertile soil. Many of us had fertile minds to recognize the good, but some of us did not. Yes?
Yeah.
But then we overstand that if the good that OMOWALE Malcolm X is doing in the world, was to be worthwhile, he had to sacrifice. And not only did he sacrifice, he paid the ultimate sacrifice for us. And so the good that is to return to him and submitting is our capacity, as was rendered in the libation, to pick up the work and to complete the work, brothers and sisters. That the good that we do, that is to return to OMOWALE Malcolm X, is in the honoring of OMOWALE Malcolm X, in the recognition of the value of the sacrifice that he made, and the understanding that we have a duty and a responsibility to do good with the good that he left for us. Is everybody with me? Bear this in mind as we go through the message. But principally, what I want us to understand and take with us is this idea of nationhood, of Oduduwa as the father of a nation, as the anchor of a nation. Is everybody with me? And so we do, as we did for earlier in the month for our Shemitah, and as we just did for our libation, we honor the mother and father of OMOWALE Malcolm X, Mama Louise Little and Baba Earl Little. We honor Mama Betty Shabazz. We honor the daughters, and we honor Malcolm Shabazz, the grandson of OMOWALE Malcolm X. This year is the 10th anniversary of his passing. And we'll say a little bit more about that later on. And finally, we're going to honor Mama Ella Collins, as we did so also during the libation. Now, the title of the message is OMOWALE and the Challenge of African Power. Tenda Mwale. The dominant narrative associated with the life of OMOWALE Malcolm X is that he goes through a series of evolutions and changes that are often signified with different names, that he's carried throughout his life. And those stages are Malcolm Little, which is from birth to when he hits the streets, Detroit Red, which is when he hits the streets, Malcolm X, which is when he's joining the Nation of Islam, and then El Haj Malik El Shabazz, when he travels to Mecca and apparently has an epiphany about the fact that much of what he was teaching in the Nation of Islam is not only false but racist, and he needs to repent from all the racism that he was teaching in the Nation of Islam. Okay? And there are... we know that narrative well. Indeed. And there are a number of ideologies that are associated with OMOWALE Malcolm X in this stage of his life. And the first, as you can see here, is that OMOWALE Malcolm X became an Islamic evangelist. That OMOWALE Malcolm X became an Islamic evangelist. Which means that after he came back from Mecca, his life became about the teaching and the proselytizing of Islam. And about the negation and the repudiation of Elijah Muhammad and the Nation of Islam as fake Islam, whilst he ascended and became proficient in the knowledge of true Islam. Is everybody with me? And in the context of this particular narrative, we want to make it clear that we are not denying that OMOWALE Malcolm X professed to be a Muslim. We're not denying this. And in fact, we respect the fact that he professed to be a Muslim. In as much as we respect the religious inclinations of all of our brothers and sisters, whatever religion they profess. Does that make sense, brothers and sisters? So we're not in denial about this fact. What we are saying, however, is that there is a mischievous narrative associated with this fact that is put forward by those who would seek to diminish the black nationalist Pan-Africanist dimension and mission of OMOWALE Malcolm X. So we are challenging that today without apology. Does that make sense? The other narrative is that OMOWALE Malcolm X became a Marxist, a socialist, that he put aside race as analysis and began to do with class as analysis. And we assert that OMOWALE Malcolm X was very, very much aware of class contradictions among African people.
Yes, he was.
We assert that. But we categorically reject the notion that OMOWALE Malcolm X became a race-neutral activist after his Mecca experience. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And associated with the Marxist socialist narrative is the civil rights integrationist narrative. There are many times where you hear the name OMOWALE Malcolm X and people will describe him as a civil rights leader. And this is a notion that can only come from, one, a lack of proficiency in the understanding of OMOWALE Malcolm X's ideology, but also a lack of understanding of the Black Liberation movement in America at the time and the dynamics of the Black Liberation movement in America at the time. Because there was a clear distinction between the civil rights movement and the Black Power movement. Does that make sense? And OMOWALE Malcolm X was one of the key inspirers of what became known as the Black Power movement. So today, we want to crystallize the ideology of OMOWALE Malcolm X through an understanding of the mission of OMOWALE Malcolm X, particularly as it is related to the identity that OMOWALE Malcolm X asserted. Are you with me? So part of the reason why a lot of these narratives are able to proliferate is because of the fact that oftentimes the importance of OMOWALE Malcolm X's sojourns across the African continent are diminished, often unknown. Remember, Oduduwa was going around the world doing the good work, doing good. OMOWALE Malcolm X literally traveled the world doing good. And one of the places that he traveled the most, especially in the last year of his life, is the continent of Mama Africa. And so you can see here his first trip was between the 6th of May and the 21st of May. That was just after the Mecca experience, 1964. And his second trip was between the 9th of July and the 24th of November, 1964. Yeah? Is everybody with me? So we say OMOWALE. And OMOWALE, as we have customarily done and asserted within the Al-Qaeda revivalist movement, under the leadership of our leadership, under the leadership of Brother Leader Bandaka, can we hear them please? Is to assert OMOWALE as the name that signifies the political legacy of OMOWALE Malcolm X and the mission for which he was working. Does that make sense? So we have to constantly remind ourselves, as we did earlier in the month, of the context in which he received the name, OMOWALE. And we delved into this, give thanks, attender. And we delved into this last month. We're going to touch on it again this month, but I want to give a bit more context, to it. OMOWALE Malcolm X speaking about his experience in Nigeria at the Ibadan University. And I want to give the broader context of what happened at the meeting in which he received the name, as illuminated for us in the autobiography of Malcolm X. Is everybody all right?
Yeah.
All right, good. He said, speaking in the Ibadan University Trenchard Hall, I urged that Africa's independent nations needed to see the necessity of helping to bring the Afro-Americans' case before the United Nations. Listen carefully. I said, just as the American Jew is in political, economic, and cultural harmony with world Jewry, I was convinced that it was time for all Afro-Americans to join the world's Pan-Africanism. All right? He goes on. I said, physically, we Afro-Americans might remain in America, fighting for our constitutional rights, but that philosophically and culturally, we Afro-Americans badly needed to return to Africa and develop a working unity in the framework of Pan-Africanism. This is OMOWALE Malcolm X speaking. He says, young Africans ask me politically sharper questions than one hears from most American adults. Then an astonishing thing happened when an old West Indian stood up and began attacking me for attacking America. Now listen, OMOWALE Malcolm X is in Africa. Yeah, attacking America. And an African from the Caribbean decides to say, well, no, that's not for go on, and begins attacking OMOWALE Malcolm X for attacking America. Right? What happened? Yeah, he says, shut up, the students yell. It's like one of the West Indian Negro. Yeah, booing and hissing the old West Indian, tried to express his defiance of them. And in a sudden rush, a group of students sprang up and were after him. He said he barely escaped ahead of them. Yeah? This is very important stuff. Yeah? He said, I never saw anything like it. Screaming at him, they ran him off the campus. Later, I found out that the old West Indian was married to a white woman. And he was trying to get a job in some white influence agency, which had put him up to challenge me. Then I understood his problem. This is serious. The American government at the time had created a number of organizations from which they sent individuals to the African continent to disturb the Pan-African energy that was developing. Many of them were sent directly after OMOWALE Malcolm X himself. Notice that this particular African does not come from the United States of America, but the Caribbean. Are you following me? We're going to come back to that a little bit later on. He continues. This wasn't the last time I'd see the Africans' almost fanatic expression of their political emotions. I want people to understand. He's speaking to a mass of students at the Ibadan University in Nigeria. I'm emphasizing the point because you're going to hear some mischievous people today speaking about the fact that OMOWALE Malcolm X was rejected when he went to the African continent. It's a lie. A very big lie. They were impassioned by what he was saying, so much so that when another African dared to challenge him, they run him off the campus. I want to know what I said, when may I say? All right. Afterwards, in the Students' Union, as we read earlier this month, I was plied with questions and I was made an honorary member of the Nigerian Muslim Student Society. Right here in my wallet is my card, Alhaji Malcolm X registration number M138. With the membership, I was given a new name, OMOWALE. Say it with me, OMOWALE.
OMOWALE.
All right, it means in the Yoruba language, the son who has come home. I meant it when I told them I had never received a more treasured honor. That's the context in which OMOWALE Malcolm X was given the name. Yes? Remember, he told the students that psychologically, philosophically, culturally, we Africans in the diaspora had to do what? Return. The name means, as he translates it, the son who has come home. But I keep trying to say last month. Earlier this month, at our Shemida, we highlighted the name OMOWALE. Say it again. OMOWALE. And what it means. And we broke it down. Omo, not necessarily son, it's child. Wa, to come, to arrive. Ile is home. So it's not just a son who has returned, It's the son or the child who has returned home. But we broke it down even further. Yeah? Praying on the wisdom of our good sister, Aderonke, who runs the channel, Yoruba Lessons with Aderonke. Breaking down the term Omo, which means child, and the fact that Omo, literally speaking, has a deeper meaning in the Yoruba language. It is the terminology used to refer to children. But the name, the word that refers to children gives expression to the role and function of the community in relation to children and children in relation to the community. So the root word is mo, which means to mold or to build. And o is that which makes the verb a noun. Is everybody with me?
Yeah.
If you want a deeper explanation, watch it on the YouTube, yeah? All right? Okay. So we see Omo means the one who is built or molded. Yes? In other words, the one who is designed for a purpose. I'm emphasizing that because I didn't emphasize the subheadings earlier this month. The one who is designed for a purpose. Every child is designed for a purpose.
That's right.
It says it also means the one who one builds and molds. We have a responsibility to build and mold the children, but that means taught or retaught how human life works so that they can fulfill the purpose.
Right.
Earlier this month, we went through the teachings that OMOWALE was given by his father and mother, was the training and the rearing that he was provided by Mama Ella. We also delved into how he began to take those lessons and apply them to his own independent study whilst he was in prison, learning how human life works, how the world works, so that he could fulfill a particular purpose.
Come on.
Where we stopped, when we concluded the message, was with a conversation about the one who builds or molds. Where we are today, where we're going today, is a conversation about what OMOWALE Malcolm X was trying to build.
Come on now.
And what he was molding. Is everybody with me?
Yeah.
That's what the term Omo in OMOWALE truly means. So what OMOWALE Malcolm X was building, what was he building? He was building the organization of Afro-American unity.
That's right.
Yeah?
Yeah.
This is the organization that he was building in the last year of his life. And so we're going to hear from the man himself now in relation to the organization of Afro-American unity.
Most people, when we say Afro-American, they think only of the Negroes in the United States. But they don't realize that 2/3 of Brazil consists of people of African blood, which means they're also Afro-American because Brazil is in South America. And in all of these, many of these countries in South America and Central America, and even in Canada, they are heavily populated with people whose ancestors came from Africa. So when you total up the number of Afro-Americans, real Afro-Americans, in the Western Hemisphere, there are perhaps 100 million. And if these people ever unite among themselves, not only is it necessary for the Afro-Americans in the United States to be organized, but it's also necessary for the Afro-Americans in the Caribbean, or the Afro-Cubans, the Afro-Brazilians. It's necessary for all of them to be organized. And then once they are organized in each place, we have to organize among ourselves so that the Afro-American in the United States will be working in conjunction in a coordinated program with those who are in Cuba and those in Brazil and those in Venezuela and those throughout the Caribbean, in Haiti and in the West Indian Islands. And in this way, we actually get strength. And it's not an accident that there's no organization existing in the Western Hemisphere that's designed toward that end. It would be a direct threat to imperialism as it really exists, and to colonialism as it exists in the West.
Tenamwari. So for those who caught that, yeah, he's defining the terminology Afro-American. And he begins by saying most people, when we say Afro-American, they only think of the Africans in the United States of America. But he begins to identify populations of Africans in the Caribbean and populations of Africans in South and Central America. Yes? Places like Brazil and Venezuela. Yeah? So, the term Afro-American automatically, as OMOWALE Malcolm X has defined it, Afro being an abbreviation for African, immediately takes the destiny of African people in the United States of America above and beyond the jurisdiction of the United States of America. It broadens the scope, meaning that the aspirations, the goals of Africans in America is no longer limited to the United States of America. Is everybody with me? So Afro-American includes all Africans in the Americas. Just by that definition, he severed an allegiance to the state of the United States of America and redefined the allegiance as Africans throughout the Americas. Is everybody with me? This is a political definition, the organization of Afro-American unity. The unity of the Afro-Americans throughout the Americas, so-called. Yeah, and it even goes further than that, because in a speech, he says, as a result of the colonial process, there are many Afro-Americans migrating to Britain and to France. And they are also Afro-Americans. Is everybody following me? Yeah. All right. So the OAU program states, under the heading Establishment, when the technology catches up. Tell them where. He says, upon this establishment, the establishment of the OAAU, the Afro-American people will launch a cultural revolution which will provide the means for restoring our identity, that we might rejoin our brothers and sisters on the African continent culturally, psychologically, economically, and share with them the sweet fruits of freedom from oppression and independence of racist governments. Now, on another day, we're going to delve deeper into what this concept of a cultural revolution means. What does that mean? What does it mean to wage a cultural revolution? But he's given us a clue here. He says, culturally, psychologically, economically. Yes? And rejoin our brothers and sisters on the African continent in these manners. In essence, we are all OMOWALE, the children who are returning home. Yeah? But let's hear some more from OMOWALE Malcolm X.
And one of the things that's going to help to bring this about is the independence of Africa. And one of the only reasons that we in the West have never organized, we have hated our image and our African image. And because Africa has been in the hands of people who have created an image of Africa that's negative and hateful. And it has been hateful to us. We haven't wanted to identify with it. But now that Africa is getting independent and in a position to create its own image, and it's a positive image, those of us in the West look at the African image and see how positive it is, and we begin to identify with it. We become proud of Africa, and we become proud of our African blood, our African heritage. And this is what is beginning to make the Africans in the Western Hemisphere today develop more race pride. And as this race pride develops, then it has a tendency to make us want to unite together and work together. And your Western imperialists and colonialists consider this to be a grave threat. More threat than communism or Marxism or socialism or anything else. The Africanism is what they consider to be the real threat.
So we see who OMOWALE Malcolm X has on the wall, right? Yeah? Papa Patrice Lumumba. Yeah? First Prime Minister of independent Congo, the man who was taken out by the forces of global white supremacy within 6 months, yes, of his coming to power in the African nation known as the Congo. And OMOWALE Malcolm X spent a significant amount of time calling out the criminality of the American government and its involvement with the assassination of Papa Patrice Lumumba and their support of those who carried out the assassination. That's something to note for now. But within the aims and objectives of the OAAU, it states clearly under the subheading General Terminologies, after assessing many of the different terms that have been used to identify African people, it states, we accept the use of the term Afro-American, which you've already defined, African and black man, or woman, in reference to persons of African heritage. So every other part of mankind goes this measure of just respect, i.e. self-determination. Yes? We do not desire more, nor shall we accept less. So having defined Afro-American and asserted the Africanness of African people through the aims and objectives of the OAAU, I want to honor another great African who is born around this period. Born in the year 1941 on the 23rd of the month called February. Passed away on the 15th of January in the year 1995. He goes by the name of Baba Amos Wilson. Author of the text that you see listed and many, many more. But in the final text that you see listed, and I actually took to honoring Baba Amos Wilson in January in line with the anniversary of his passing. The only reason why it's not in February is because we honor OMOWALE Malcolm X around the same period. You following me? Yeah? In Bar 23rd of February. We're not on time for that right now. Right? You know what I'm saying? Yeah? But we're going to honor him today. Yes? Within the context. Yeah? Of honoring OMOWALE Malcolm X. And in the book, Blueprint for Black Power, full title, a moral, political, and economic imperative for the 21st century, Baba Amos Wilson states, identity, listen carefully, brothers and sisters. Are you with me? Yeah. Identity as a personal or collective phenomena is as much, if not more, a political, economic entity, as it is a purely social and psychological entity. Yes? As a political economy, identity is an organization of interests, tastes, desires, passions, ideals, motives, values, knowledges, abilities, skills, etc. Is everybody with me? Yeah. Identity is not just something that you use for card people. Identity is an organization of interests, tastes, desires, passions, ideals, motives, values, knowledges, abilities, skills. In other words, if you can identify a people, you can identify their interests. You can identify their politics. You can identify their economics. The pursuit, satisfaction, exercise, and realization of which helps to maintain the social power relations, social prerogatives, and the integrity of social, political, economic systems which characterize a particular culture and its status quo. I hope you're following me. Because I don't have time to explain everything. We have to cut and move. You're not wrong. Next time I'll do that. All right? The individual's personality is formed by and reflects the political, social, and economic character of the culture and society into which he is born and nurtured. Societies and cultures socialize individuals to adapt to, contribute to, and operate in their unique socio-economic system. Yeah? It's the reason why every liberation movement, African or otherwise, begins by defining the people it is fighting on behalf of. Does everybody understand?
Yeah, yeah.
You have to identify the people. And what you identify with, who you identify with, tells us what your interests are, what your political objectives are, what your economic objectives are. When you acquire skills, who you are going to employ those skills on behalf of. Whether you yam jollof or chips on a Sunday. Yeah? Are you following me? Whether your favorite movie is Sankofa or Saving Private Ryan. Is everybody with me? Yeah? Whether you wear agbada or business suit.
Come on. Come on.
Are you following me?
Word.
So, OMOWALE Malcolm X is traveling the world like Oduduwa, doing good. And he goes to a nation called Ghana. And in having identified what it means to be an African American, he goes to Ghana and is preaching and teaching about the experiences of Africans, particularly in the United States of America. And he goes to Ghana asserting the interests and the political goals of Africans in America, Africans throughout the diaspora, and aligning them with those of Africans on the continent. And in doing so, he needs to warn Africans on the continent about the devil coming from the place that he comes from. Is everybody with me? So he goes to Ghana. And he reflects on his trip in Ghana in the autobiography. He says, I think that nowhere is the black continent's wealth and natural beauty of its people richer than in Ghana. Ghana at this time is led by the Osagyefo Kwame Nkrumah. Yes? Which is proudly the very fountainhead of Pan-Africanism.
That's right.
He says, I stepped off the plane into a jarring note. A red-faced American white man recognized me. He had the nerve to come up, grabbing my hand and telling me in a molasses drawl that he was from Alabama and that he invited me to his home for dinner. I'm going to skip this slide for the sake of time. Yeah? Because he makes the point later on. He says, right there at my Ghanaian breakfast table was where I made up my mind that as long as I was in Africa, every time I opened my mouth, I was going to make things hot for that white man. Grinning through his teeth, wanting to exploit Africa again. This is after Mecca. Yeah? Yes, this is definitely after Mecca. All right? It had been her human wealth the last time. Now, he wanted Africa's mineral wealth. Listen carefully, kings and queens. He says, in the University of Ghana's Great Hall, I addressed the largest audience I would in Africa. Mostly Africans, but also numerous whites. Yes? What was the white man doing in Africa in 1964? That was the question. Yes? What was he doing? All right? He says, before this audit, I tried my best to demolish the false image of American race relations that I knew was being spread by the U.S. Information Agency. In a speech called Prospect for Freedom, he speaks about the fact that they sent a lot of Negroes to the African continent to tell Africans on the continent how much progress was being made by Africans in America. He said they tell how the Civil Rights Bill was being handed down. Yes? And the aim was to create a separation between the interests of the Africans in America and the interests of Africans on the continent. I don't think you hear what I'm saying. Yeah? He goes on. I tried to impress upon them all the true picture of the Afro-Americans' plight at the hands of the white man. I worked on those whites there in the audience. And he says, I've never seen so many whites, so nice, to so many blacks as you white people here in Africa. In America, Afro-Americans are struggling for integration. They should come here to Africa and see how you grin at the Africans. You've really got integration here, he says. But can you tell the African that in America you grin at black people? No, you can't. And you don't honestly like these Africans any better either. But what you do like is the minerals under her soil.
Come on.
He says, those whites in the audience turned pink and red. They knew I was telling the truth. I am not anti-American, he says. I didn't come here to condemn America. I want to make that clear. I told them I came here to tell the truth. And if the truth condemns America, then she stands condemned. Yeah? What's beautiful about the white man sometimes is that he often leaves records of events such as these. And he left a record of this speech and the speech that OMOWALE Malcolm X made in Ibadan University. And this is the white man's assessment as published in the New York Times, on the 25th of July 1964. He says, the effect of what he told university students in this city, which was Lagos, still reverberates in this land of 40 million people. Good people. This is the white man talking. Friendly people. Eager to reach across the sea to the white man in America. But many of the young men and women in this town now shudder when they think of us, the USA. For Malcolm X was here, brutalizing us, charging us with being a vast national torture chamber. He says, the white man says, he arose the students at the Ibadan University during a lecture here. We referred to it earlier. That they threw a university staff member off the platform when the latter attempted to defend the USA. Knowing full well the hatred of the African for the African government of the Union of South Africa, wicked apartheid South Africa, Malcolm X then screamed, racial discrimination in the USA is worse than apartheid South Africa. So we see from this testimony of the white man that the white man was nervous about the effect of the words of OMOWALE Malcolm X in aligning the interests of Africans in America with the interests of Africans on the continent through the affirmation of an African identity. Is everybody with me? There's more. OMOWALE Malcolm X speaks at the OAU summit Sorry, he doesn't speak at the OAU summit. He attends the OAU summit. Yeah? And he sends around a memorandum to the heads of state and various officials at this OAU summit. And he closes the memorandum by saying this: one last word, my beloved brothers and sisters at this African summit. No one knows the master better than his servant. We have been servants in America for over 300 years. We have a thorough inside knowledge of this man who calls himself Uncle Sam. Therefore, you must heed our warning. Don't escape from European colonialism only to become even more enslaved by deceitful, friendly American dollarism. What's happening here? This is the revolutionary 60s. A number of African nations are being made independent in actuality and in deception. The white man in the Western world is engaged in the Cold War. And as a result of being in the Cold War, he has to project himself on the world stage as the bastion for democracy and freedom, civil rights and human rights. Because Russia is on the rise and attempting to imperialize itself and draw Africans within its sphere of influence. The Cold War is waging. OMOWALE Malcolm X is in position to make an embarrassment out of the American government for its treatment of African people. But the African on the continent is being cajoled and sweet-talked into these political economic relationships with the white man in America. And so OMOWALE Malcolm X is warning us on the continent, don't get into bed with these people. These are the same, the Americans are the same as the British, are the same as the Portuguese, and the French, and the Belgians, and the Germans. The Americans are the picnic of the British. Is that what it is?
Yeah. Bring the words.
So we see in the latter speeches of OMOWALE Malcolm X, he continually makes reference to the Western power structure. He's identifying who the enemy is. The enemy is not just the former colonial master in name. The enemy is the Western power structure. All who comes under the influence and defines itself within the auspices of this geopolitical entity called the West. What is the West?
Come on.
That's a good question.
Bring it.
What's the West? Yeah, definition taken from a few different places. Yeah. The West, in modern usage, is the Western world. Yeah, it refers to Europe. Where it refer to?
Europe.
Where does it refer to?
Europe.
And to areas whose populations largely originate from Europe. Yeah? Through the age of discoveries, imperialism. Notice they say the age of discoveries, imperialism. Sounds nice. The age of discovery, yes. Imperialism. What they mean is, when the white man go to America and massacre the people them. Then him go to Australia and massacre the people them. Then him go to New Zealand and massacre the... That's what they mean. The age of discovery is imperialism. Genocidal mass murderer of millions of people.
Millions is a pretty word.
Millions of people. All right?
Come on.
In the aftermath of World War II, more properly referred to as Mass European War II, Western world took on a new political definition. I want you to listen to me. He says it was used to describe countries that had democratic, capitalist governments. Democratic, capitalist governments and were aligned alongside the United States, France, and the United Kingdom. Remember what Baba Amos Wilson said to us about identity. Through your identity, you identify your interests. So the Asaja for Kwame Nkrumah, in the same year that OMOWALE Malcolm X was assassinated, 1965, publishes this book, a prophetic book. If you want to understand what's happening in Africa and the Caribbean now, read this book. He wrote it in 1965 and predicted the next few decades, yes, of African statehood life. Defines the concept of neocolonialism. Him and OMOWALE Malcolm X are preaching the same message in a lot of ways. What OMOWALE Malcolm X refers to as American dollarism, Osagyefo calls neocolonialism. Yeah? The new form of colonialism. He says the essence of neocolonialism is that the state which is subject to it is in theory independent and has all the outward trappings of international sovereignty. In reality, its economic system and thus its political policy is directed from outside. That's right. Listen, in reality, it's what? Economic system. American dollarism, economic system. Yeah. American dollarism, and thus its political policy is directed from outside. I'm not going to read the next slide for the sake of time. But in the context of this Western neocolonial imperialist order, yes, they set up a number of institutions, many of which come under the banner of the Bretton Woods institutions. Yes. Most notably, the IMF and the World Bank. Yes? All right, now notice, I'm not going to go into this too much, but you can see here, the Bretton Woods system of monetary management established the rules of commercial and financial relations among the United States, Canada, and Western European countries, Australia and Japan. These are the nations that were aligned with the West during Mass European War II. Yeah. Are you following me? Yeah. The primary institutions that were set up were the IMF and the World Bank, yes? Later to be joined by the World Trade Organization, the United Nations, what do they call it? Something there? I forget the... coming to that. The World Economic Forum, yeah? And so on and so forth, yeah? Just note those names for now. Right. So we have a situation in which from that time till now, there is an unbroken line of neocolonial penetration among African people on the continent and in the diaspora. I'm not going to go too much into this, but this is an example of French neocolonialism. Cut a long story short, the French never wanted to let go of their colonies. Yeah? What they did in the coming tide of African resistance to colonialism was to cajole a lot of the elites in the French-speaking African nations into what they call an independence package, which would maintain French colonialism in its new form on the African continent. A few of the highlights of these packages, yeah, was that these African nations were to deposit 85% of their foreign reserves into the French central bank. Yes? That France had first right of refusal over any natural resources that were found in the nation. Is everybody with me? Yeah? And consequently today, yes, the nations that are still bound up in these agreements are Benin. This is today, not 50 years ago. Today, Benin, Burkina Faso, Guinea-Bissau, Ivory Coast, Mali, Niger, Senegal, although some of these are in some rebellions at the moment. Let's bear that in mind. Yeah? Togo, Cameroon, Central African Republic, Chad, Congo, Brazzaville, Equatorial Guinea, and Gabon. Consequently today, yes, through this currency called the CFA franc, or the franc CFA, these nations deposit collectively over $500 billion into the French central bank. A year, sorry. Over 500 billion annually into the French central bank. Is everybody following me? Their currency is tied to the French euro.
Yeah.
The currency of all of these nations is printed in France. And if they want to get back some of the money that they've been giving France, they have to apply for a loan to get it. Is everybody with me?
Yeah.
Yeah? Well, it's the euro now. It's the euro now. Yeah. No, yeah, it's a CFA franc, but it's tied to the euro. Yeah. Yeah, it's tied to the euro. Yeah. But in Africa, it's called the CFA franc. In France, it's called the euro. Yeah? All right. We're up to date right now. Yeah. We're today. Yes? A couple months ago in December, a big pantomime was held in Washington, D.C., the capital of American dollarism, of neocolonialism in today's world. Is everybody with me? I'm nearing the close. I want people to all understand the challenge of African power. Bearing in mind that the white man was threatened by OMOWALE Malcolm X's ability to relate the interests of Africans on the continent with Africans in the diaspora and what that meant for American dollarism, neocolonialism, Western imperialism. Yes? So they developed the IMF and the World Bank to keep us under their control. They developed this French independence package to keep us under their control. Now, the USA is still in competition with Russia, but even more so now in competition with China. Because China is fast rising as an economic power, particularly on the African continent. I'm not a friend of China. I don't advocate what China's doing on the African continent. Whoever controls Africa rules the world. And we have to control Africa. However, there is a lot of anti-China propaganda that is being promoted for the sake of pro-Western imperialist interests. We have to be very careful of it. Time doesn't allow to go into it, but you understand the point I'm making. So America now wants to regain some of whatever ground it's losing in relation to China. So it hosts this pantomime, the US Africa Leaders Summit in December of last year. And what you'll find among this particular arrangement is the extent to which they co-opt Pan-African language, like free trade area. Our ancestors, like Osaze Kwame and Nkrumah and Patrice Lumumba, were trying to build that on African terms in the 60s and 70s. Are you following me? Yeah? Like common currency. You're going to find these terminologies floating around neo-colonial governments on the African continent today. They're borrowing from the Pan-African playbook, but for neo-colonial purposes. You're going to find that today. Hence, there is a lot of confusion around what exactly is Pan-Africanism today. Yes? Then, this is designed, this pantomime is designed to facilitate the new scramble for Africa's resources. And I'm going to give you a couple of examples. It's taken from the African Business magazine or their website. Yeah? And they had what was called a room for deals. Yeah? A deals room where all of these African heads of states and officials go into the room and come out with a deal. Yeah? American government officials are in the room. The American Secretary of Defense is at the summit telling the African leaders about the dangers of China and Russia because they have nefarious intentions that can destabilize the region. The current American Secretary of Defense is a black man. Yeah? Have you heard me? Yeah. All right. Okay. Cobalt Metals and the Zambian government. This is an example of a lot of the deals that were made at the pantomime. Yeah? Zambian President Hakainde Hichilema appeared at the US Africa Business Forum the deal room. You go in and come up with a deal. Apple was at the conference. Tesla was at the conference. Microsoft was at the conference. Yeah? Business Forum deal room to celebrate the announcement of Cobalt Metals, a startup backed by Bill Gates. Yeah? Breakthrough Energy Ventures will invest $150 million to explore Zambian copper mines using AI, artificial intelligence. The deal has the potential to provide enough copper for more than 100 million electric vehicles, batteries, in a bid to cater for the global electric vehicle boom, a press statement said. Next, ABD Group and Acro Bridge. Yeah, everybody's celebrating the deal then. The government of Angola is partnering with two American companies, ABD Group, the Acro Bridge, to build 186 steel bridges covering every territory in Angola. The first phase of a $371 million project that will start in the year 2023. Cisco Systems and Cyber Station, a diaspora-owned small business. When they say diaspora, they mean American diaspora. So the Cyber Station is an American company that is based in Burkina Faso. I know I have to wrap up. I'm coming, yeah? I'm coming, all right? That is based in Burkina Faso, all right? Jointly announced $800 million in new contracts to protect African countries from cyber threats. One particularly important. What country do you know allows another nation in the name of cyber security to control its telecommunications? Would America allow China, a Chinese company, to be the primary company in charge of its telecommunications in the name of security, national security? It don't even make sense. Yeah?
U.S. national security.
Exactly, we're coming to that. All right? I'm gonna miss out Visa, but we all know Visa. We use Visa every day. Yeah? We use Visa every day, right? We use our bank card. Yeah? Now check the last one. General Electric and there's one missing. Oh no, here it is. Yeah, General Electric and Standard Bank will provide $80 million to improve healthcare services across the continent and provide access to cutting-edge healthcare equipment. Now, that sounds nice, right? Notice the disparity in figures, however. 150 million. Copper, mining. 371 million. Yes? You see there? Yeah? The cybersecurity, 800 million. Yeah? Visa, 1 billion. Healthcare, 80 million. Across the whole of Africa. Are you with me?
Yeah.
We don't have time to go into this, but this is an example of what Western companies are already doing in Zambia and the exploitative relationship that they have with the Zambian government and the Zambian people, from everything from poor wages to poor working conditions and human rights violations. Yeah. Is everybody with me?
Yeah.
This is concerning the fact that there are 101 companies on the British stock market that control over 1 trillion in African resources today. Housed in a document called The New Colonialisms, Britain's Scramble for Africa, Energy and Mineral Resources. Is everybody with me?
Yeah.
Then we have NATO, as Prince Amari was alluded to earlier, and African. We're not going to steer you, but I want to introduce you to General Michael Langley. Yes, a proud Negro. Proud Uncle Tom. Yeah? Who is the current head of AFRICOM, which is the US Africa High Command, with partners, counters transnational threats and malign actors, strengthen security forces and response to crisis in order to advance what? US national interests and promote regional security, stability, and prosperity. The US Africa High Command. And Southcom is the same thing, but operating in the Americas. So the Caribbean is governed by Southcom, the US Southern Command. Is everybody with me? Yeah. This is important. Why? In the same year that Malcolm Shabazz was assassinated, another very important thing happened in that same month, in fact, which was that Mama Assata Shakur was made one of the top 10 most wanted individuals in the world, terrorists in the world, by the FBI. Pardon me? The bounty was raised to 2 million, from 1 million to 2 million on her head. This was under the presidency of Barack Hussein Obama. Yes? And one of the most important things that another Negro who announced, yes, a black man who announced the raising of this bounty said was one of the reasons why she's still wanted and the bounty was raised. No. It was the FBI agent. Eric Holder was the Secretary of State or something like that. Yeah, Attorney General, sorry. The Negro who announced the bounty being raised on her head said these words. She continues to promote her terrorist ideology. Consider what happens in Africa with Africom. When Africans decide, when I want the French there again, when I want Bill Gates and Microsoft and Tesla and Shell, what happens? When Africans rise up in the name of revolutionary Pan-African nation building, they have already defined it as a terrorist ideology. So we're going to end here with the words of Baba Amos Wilson.
What characteristics in the African personality and in the minds of African children, which if they existed there would be perceived as threats to European domination? And you will see those characteristics being what? Neutralized and washed out. And from that, when you start with that question, you can begin to see the system organized economically, politically, educationally, and in every way to create those characteristics or to neutralize those other characteristics which work against European interests. If the love of African people, one from the other, if we can look beyond these names that white people have put upon us and see ourselves as one African people, is a threat to European dominance, then you will see us identifying ourselves in terms of these European given names. I'm West Indian, I'm Bahamian, I'm Afro-American, I'm this, and using those as what? As the basis and foundation for not coming together and organizing as a people, you see. In fact, you heard, I believe, on LIB the other day, I think the United States is now getting ready to put in a new racial category in the census called mixed. That's going to give a lot of Negroes a way out. Yeah. So they're going to bring into being a mixed race. So in the future, you can check off mixed. You know, check your little color out and do the mixed number. A South Africanization, this is the thing I've tried to tell people for years and years, that race is not only a biological term, a genetic term, it is also a sociological term. And to a great extent, it is more important sociologically than it is biologically. People can define you in or out of the race at any time they feel like it. And one of the powers that we've given and permitted the European to have, you see, is that power to define ethnicity in the way that suits his will and his wishes. So now, in order to water down and knock down African unity and sense of peopleness, we will now create a new ethnic group, and that is the one called mixed. knowing that some of you seeking to escape your blackness and escape your African heritage and so forth will eagerly move toward that group, and you'll get a little differential crumb for identifying yourself that way, and therefore the burgeoning and developing power of African people can be broken, and our subordination can continue. This is the kind of game that is going on when you let another people define who and what you're about. It also lets you know then that the identification of black people the world over as African people is a major threat to European dominance. Otherwise, there would be no need for them to do what? Redefine you ethnically. They are motivated then to redefine the ethnic group, because redefinition of it means the minoritizing of the ethnic group, and therefore the more you fracture and minoritize a group, the weaker that group is, and that group then cannot overthrow you. When you are a minority, you gain power by minoritizing everybody else. And this is the game. And therefore, if identifying ourselves as Africans, regardless of nationality, is a threat to Europeans, you're going to find your children reject being called what? African.
Tanamwari. Can we have another Amos Wilson, please? Yeah. So we're seeing at the moment a sharp rise in people that are rejecting and very antagonistic towards African identity for all kinds of stupid reasons. And it's easy to dismiss it as self-hatred, and it is. But even deeper than being self-hatred, we must understand that self-hatred has a political function within the system of global white supremacy, Western imperialism. It has a political function because the African identity is designed to be an organizational infrastructure of the interests of African people. Once you destabilize the identity, you destabilize the organizational infrastructure. And so it is important for us to take up the work of OMOWALE Malcolm X right now in re-emphasizing the power of the African identity, in affirming the political interest of African people as a collective of people, in understanding that the West is a geopolitical entity, global geopolitical entity, and we maximize our capacity to fight that entity when we recognize and actualize our global geopolitical power as African people. Then, and only then, will we be able to say, we declare our rights on this earth to be a man, to be a human being, to be respected as a human being, to be given the rights of a human being in this society, on this earth, and in this day, which we intend to bring it to a distance by any means necessary. 10-9-1.